So I'm going to start off my presentation with a quote by Abraham Lincoln. I am in favor of animal rights as well as human rights. That is the way of a whole human being. I'm Eiley Sierra, and I'm here to talk to you about animal cruelty. Why choose animal cruelty when there are other options? Specifically, I'm going to talk to you about animal experimentation. Animal abuse in general, or neglect, is an issue that not everyone looks at or pays attention to. This is due to the people not being informed of what kind of abuse that pets, wildlife, animals, and farm animals go through. People need to learn the connection between animal abuse and domestic violence, and also violent crimes. They also need to know the effects of animal abuse on the animals in general and on society. If a human is going to neglect an animal, they're most likely going to neglect a human as well. We should stop animal cruelty, for example, animal experimentation. Animals can't speak up for themselves, for one, and there are so many other alternative ways to do the testing, so why do it on the animals? Animal cruelty can be either deliberate abuse or simply the failure to care for your pet. Whether the animal is a pet, a farm life animal, or a wildlife animal, the victim can suffer terribly. Deliberate cruelty may involve direct violence actions towards the animal, aka as stabbing, beating, burning, etc. Neglect is not giving an animal necessary food, water, shelter, or vet care that they need to survive. Because their misery is often prolonged, the animal who dies of neglect can suffer just as much as an animal who dies from deliberate harm. So animals that are being tested on live very stressful, monotonous, and unnatural lives. They are deprived from their regular lives that they should have. The only changes that happens in their lifetime is them being pulled out of a crate that they live in to be tested on. They get pulled into the testing protocol rooms. Animals are subjected to experiment different things like testing new drugs, infecting them with diseases, burning their skin, poisoning the toxicity testing, causing brain damage, implanting electrodes into the brain, maiming, and blinding, and the list just goes on. So here's a picture of a cat. See, if that was your cat, would you really want them to be going through this? This would be planting an electrode into their brain. How would you feel if someone put you in a cage and did that to you? Yeah, I don't think you would like that. No one would, really. And then there's a puppy getting tested on. I don't know how you can do that to such an innocent face when there's so many other ways to do experimental testing for drugs and whatnot. So, as of everything, there are always pros and cons, but the cons in this case definitely weigh out the pros. The only pro that can come from this is whether it be cosmetic or medical testing. Companies find it difficult to have human testing trials without there being data logs to ensure the safety of a human. In a company's defense, it's easier to just justify the death of an animal than it is to justify the death of a human, because the rest of the world values a human life more than any other living creatures. So that's typically the only pro, because animals don't have the exact rights as we do. The cons, obviously, that weigh out the pros are animals are mutilated, they're tortured, and they're killed. Animals and humans are comparable with testing. Some substances tested on animals may never even be used on the public consumption, so it's kind of almost pointless to test certain things. Expenses, purchasing animal, and costs of food and shelter. In psychological testing, animal brains are not developed like our brains, so there again, what's the point of testing an animal if it's not going to be the same as ours? Exactly. As I said before, that there's many other ways to do experimental testing for these certain things instead of doing it on an animal. For example, now we have computer modeling. Researchers have developed a wide range of sophisticated computer models that can stimulate a human body, biology, and the progression of developing diseases. Studies show that these models can accurately predict the ways that these new drugs would affect our human bodies, and instead of doing this experimentation on an animal. There's also in vitro testing. In vitro testing is the technique of a given procedure in a controlled environment outside the living organism. So putting it in a petri dish. It's the in vitro international Corocytex. It's synthetic, which is known as synthetic skin. It takes less time to experiment on the synthetic skin rather than testing on animals. A variety of cell-based tests and tissues models can be used to assess the safety of drugs, chemicals, cosmetics, and consumer products. And another one is human patient stimulizers. Human patient stimulizers that bleed, breathe, convulse, talk, and even die have been shown to teach students psychologically and pharmacology better than curd exercises than experimenting on animals. These stimulators mimic the real life illness and injuries that we have, and they give the appropriate biological response to medical interventions and injections of medications. There's also a weird thing that I found out. Well, it's kind of weird. The new swatches of skin that are being grown in labs are for the sole purpose of having cosmetics, is the use of foreskins off of newborn babies. And so you can just donate your baby's foreskin, and it'll be tested for like makeup products and other things to see if it affects the skin. So that's all I have for you today. Just think about, why would you really let somebody experiment on your pet? I know I love my puppy. I wouldn't let anybody harm him. So why let people harm other animals? I'll leave you with that. Thank you for your time.